All right. All right. Welcome, guys. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Sabby Sab Show on Revolutionary Blackout Network. Want to give a big shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. We have an interesting conversation tonight. I want to go ahead and pull up the thumbnail here. So we're discussing two stories here. The first one is Russell Brand and Joe Rogan discussing political brands. So that's going to be an interesting conversation, this whole idea of these labels, so to speak. And we're also going to discuss Howard Schultz. So he is the CEO, interim CEO, actually, of Starbucks. And he is under quite a lot of scrutiny right now. So we're going to get into that situation as well. So welcome. First and foremost, I'm going to start saying hello to people in the chat. What's going on? Sakudo says first. Yes, you are. You're the first one here. Shout out to Dabby Dab says, what's up, R&B fam? Don't forget to show the like button some love. That's right. Go ahead and smash that like button for me, guys. Shout out to Ryan says, hello, everyone. Greetings, Zach says, here we are. Shout out to Rick says, hey, y'all. Greetings, Janice says, hi, everyone. Hope you are doing well. And shout out to Pechico says, hey, hey, Sabby and everybody. I said, hi. I said, hey. All right. I want to get started with this story about Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz first. The interesting thing about him is that he was the CEO of Starbucks, then he stepped down as CEO, and then he decided to come back as an interim CEO because Starbucks locations were deciding to unionize. So he was actually brought back to stop those efforts. Isn't that really crappy when you think about it? Really crappy. But before we get into his issue with unions at Starbucks, I do want to remind you who Howard Schultz actually is. And I think that some people may not be aware of this because not a lot of people know about this, or maybe not a lot of people remember that he did this. But Howard Schultz did run for, or started to run for president for 2020. And a lot of people, it just kind of went over their heads. He wasn't covered heavily in mainstream media, but when he was covered, it wasn't in a good light. And what's interesting about him is that he actually wanted to run as an independent because he felt that both parties had neglected the people. So this is the same person, you guys. This is the same person who doesn't want Starbucks employees to unionize, but at the same time, he was willing to run for president in 2020. And he wanted to run as an independent because he did not want he didn't want to run through the two-party system because he didn't believe that they actually were satisfying the needs of the people. So it just goes to show you how a person can be one way, and then when they are not running for office, you see the real them. So I want to go ahead and show you this clip here about his announcement when he was deciding that he was most likely going to run. Listen to this.
As you know, all this as the race for 2020 intensifies. Former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz now says he's considering a run, taking on both the president and Democrats. Chief National Affairs correspondent Tom Yamas is here, and Tom, Schultz is considering running as an independent.
That's right, Robin, and good morning. The man who gave us so many choices when it comes to coffee believes Americans want something else when it comes to politics. But some Democrats worry that move will only help President Trump calling the potential independent bid a vanity project and describing it as a catastrophic mistake.
Now, obviously, I agree with an independent run. I think people should run as independents. I think people should run as third party. I totally agree with that. But he's a hypocrite because the reason why he wanted to run as an independent is because he wanted to help the people, right? He wanted to serve the needs of the people. But here he is as the CEO of Starbucks shutting down the needs and the will of the people. So listen to this. Obviously, as you can see, mainstream media was heavily against this, but listen to what he has to say.
I am seriously thinking of running for president.
Former Starbucks chairman Howard Schultz getting ready to possibly shake up the 2020 race for president, announcing on 60 Minutes and Twitter that if he runs, it won't be as a Republican or a Democrat, tweeting, "I love our country and I am seriously considering running for president as a centrist independent."
Not only the fact that this president is not qualified to be the president, but the fact that both parties are consistently not doing what's necessary on behalf of the American people and aren't engaged.
Not doing what's necessary on behalf of the American people. And neither is he right now. Just keep that in mind. This is why I tell you all politicians, they're all frauds. Like they say what people need to hear in order for you to vote for them.
Engaged every single day in revenge politics.
Schultz, a self-described lifelong Democrat, was also a progressive CEO, offering full health and tuition benefits for all employees, even.
He was a progressive CEO offering full health insurance and benefits for all employees, but he was also against Medicare for all. So just keep this in mind. He was not really progressive. Oh boy.
Even part-time. But some Democrats worry about his independent bid, concerned it will siphon votes from the eventual Democratic nominee. Former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro, who already announced his bid, saying this.
It would provide Donald Trump with his best hope of getting reelected.
Now, Schultz will be on a book tour over the next few months, traveling the country, and he'll make a decision at some point following that tour. He's already assembled a team of political advisors and says he will try to get on the ballot in every state if he runs. We're going to have to wait and see, guys, but the news is definitely shaking up the Democratic side of the race so far.
So that's just a reminder for you there that he was actually trying to run for president of the United States in 2020. And I wanted to share that with you so you could see just how hypocritical Howard Schultz is. Now, I want to mention, we're going to start with the fight in court. We're going to start with this video first because there are former Starbucks employees that have decided to take their issue to court because they were fired because they tried to unionize. Okay. Keep in mind, Howard Schultz is very much complicit in this. He had a hand in this. I interviewed one of these employees that was fired. I'm going to show you a clip from that in just a second. But first, let's get to the fight for court, because I feel like, you can't say that you're for the workers and then you try to get rid of the workers who want to actually have some type of a union. You can't say that. This guy was a fraud. He was a fake. You got to expose him for what he really is. But listen to this. These are a few of the Starbucks former employees that were fired for trying to unionize their Starbucks location. Listen. So Katie, James, and Jocelyn, Jocelyn's the one I interviewed, you're going to hear from her in just a second, are fighting Starbucks in court. Here we go.
I don't really have like another job plan. I mean, I would like to go back to working at Starbucks. I would be happy beyond words just to get like what I feel like I'm rightfully owed, which is like what I have been denied the ability to earn.
In a way, I guess being fired from Starbucks is like a double-edged sword. It did create a lot of, I guess, just like inner turmoil, a lot of anxiety. It created financial instability. On the other hand, it has also made me, I guess, more confident in a way. I'm still, I guess, a very anxious person, but it has made me more willing to speak out.
Well, I'm looking at reinstatement for Starbucks. And once I'm reinstated, I will be working 2 jobs in hopes that I can get enough money saved up to go to college.
Listen to what she just said. She's hoping that if she gets reinstated at Starbucks, she'll be able to have 2 jobs. This is the America that people live in today, where you have to work 2 jobs. And she's hoping that she can save enough money to go to college. So obviously this is someone who's sounds like she's trying not to have to take out student loans. But you shouldn't have to work 2 jobs in the United States of America to even make this a reality. That's the sad part.
I'm going to work my ass off in college, and I'm going to become a labor and employment attorney. That is my goal, and I'm incredibly passionate about it, to make sure this doesn't happen again, because it's not fair. You're fired for something that, like, the reason I did all this was not to be a malicious, like, menace, bad kid that Starbucks is trying to paint me out to be, right? Like, the reason I did this was because I cared about people, and I wanted people to not have to suffer every day to get by. And if I can recognize that at 17, 18, why aren't these 40-plus-year-olds who are firing me, like, why can't they see that? Why do I have to make them see that?
The reason, I'll answer that question for her. The reason is because management looks out for management. Managers don't look out for the employees for the most part. They protect other managers because they want to keep their sweet, cushy gig. And if that means they have to throw employees under the bus, that's what they'll do.
These are people's livelihoods that they're destroying. And if a 17, 18-year-old can see that and a 40-plus-year-old can't, there is something wrong, very wrong.
Okay, so they are taking their case to court. And I want to show you a clip from Jocelyn. When Jocelyn came on to my show, her story was pretty yikes. Pretty, really, really sad. And a lot of the people that are working at Starbucks that had to deal with these conditions, these are young people. These are young people who are just trying to find a way to get by. Just trying to find a way to get by. So let's go ahead and show this clip of Jocelyn when she came on, because her situation was, I guess I would say, pretty unique. She was at a location where they were actually removing hours from people as well. So it wasn't just firing those who were trying to unionize. It was also removing hours from people who actually work those hours, which is ridiculous. That's why I asked her, I was like, isn't that like illegal? So listen to this for just a second. Crazy. Now I know that you were eventually removed. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I was fired July 27th. They had fired me for different, so they had cited different times where I was late for under 5 minutes. And then, which is insane on its own, because there were people who were definitely late way more than 5 minutes that were not written up. It was just because she didn't like me, or I'm not sure. I think it was definitely more of a union retaliation, because I was one of the main organizers, and definitely I was out in the media and press more than my coworkers. And then there was also an incident with a key where I had been in a car accident the month before. But I opened the store every day, and I guess I had been changing rentals, and I had changed rentals like the week before, but I had opened the store the day before also. And I guess I lost my key, and I immediately called my manager. I called all the other shift supervisors because I needed to open the store. And I had yeah, so I had been in contact, did everything I was supposed to do, got a spare key for the next day, and opened the store the next day. And then the day after, my manager found my key by her desk. And then she didn't tell me about it. So I texted her, heard you found my key. And she said that she didn't know my key was still lost. And then 3 weeks later, fired me for not for losing the key, but for not telling her it remained lost. And which was the words written on the separation form. It was for not telling her the key remained lost.
And this is what they'll do, management, when they're trying to get rid of you. Obviously, they're not going to tell you that they're going to fire you because you're trying to unionize. That's considered retaliation. So they'll find another reason to get rid of you. And that's what they did with Jocelyn. Now, Jocelyn's story has been shared on multiple networks. I've seen her on Hardland's media as well, telling this story. So I'm very happy that she's one of the former employees that's taking this case to court, because something has to be done here. Someone has to step in and protect the workers. And that has not been happening. Now, I want to show you why Howard Schultz is in trouble and what is happening with that particular situation, because again, he was brought in as the interim CEO. They brought him back. He was CEO. He stepped down. They brought him back to prevent people from forming a union. He was solely brought back for that particular purpose. So this is not someone who is for the workers. He never really was to begin with. He's full of it. Let's just be real. And let's see what happened here. Now, shout out to More Perfect Union, because they have really been on track with this. I'm going to make this a little bit larger for you guys. Okay. Breaking news. The NLRB ruled today that Starbucks illegally fired and mistreated 35 union workers in Buffalo and Rochester. And if I remember correctly, I believe Jocelyn was from the Buffalo location, if I remember correctly. So this was illegal, which is what we were saying at that point in time. Let's go on. As part of the punishment, billionaire CEO Howard Schultz must record a video in which he reads workers' rights. Now let's go on, because that's not all. The NLRB also ordered Starbucks to compensate workers who had hours cut, as well as reinstated and compensate 7 illegally fired workers. And the company must bargain with a store that had majority support before extreme union busting spoiled an election. Now, I want to comment on this piece right here, hours cut. Because Jocelyn was one of the employees that had hours cut. So what does that mean? It's like she would log her time and then she would check later on that week and there would be like hours removed from her time. Now, the only person that had the authority to do that was management. So management came in and they started removing hours that she had already worked. So she wasn't even paid for it. That's illegal. This piece here, where it says, and the company must bargain with a store that had majority support before extreme union busting spoiled an election. That's another thing. Is like, again, they brought in Howard Schultz to prevent more locations from unionizing. Oh, thank you so much for the reminder, Roger. Great Neck, Long Island, Nassau County Starbucks Sab. Yeah, okay, that's right. That was Jocelyn's location. Thank you so much for that, Roger. And thanks for the super chat. And thanks for this one as well. Jocelyn, thanks for interview, Sab. You remind I must call Jocelyn. Yeah, give her a ring to see how she's doing. But that's what he was brought in to do. Now they go on to say, More Perfect Union has covered many of the illegally fired Starbucks workers who were vindicated by this NLRB decision. Brian Nuzzo, a highly regarded shift supervisor from Rochester, was fired for showing up to work too early. So not only did they claim that Jocelyn was in trouble because she showed up 5 minutes late or less than 5 minutes late, but this gentleman, he was in trouble because he came to work too early. Do you see how this works? Like, this is ridiculous, obviously. But they were trying to find a reason to get rid of them. Now, let's go ahead and play this clip here because I want you to hear his story as well.
I definitely think it
get on my back, but I would do it over and over again if I could.
I definitely think it
Get on my back, but I would do it over and over again if I could.
I gave 5.5 years of my life to this company. And for what? To be just tossed aside like this for trying to be proactive? I went into the store a few minutes early by myself, and according to policy, you're not allowed in the store alone. We had 3 of our morning workers call out, so I had to go in early because I had to figure out my plan. I was just trying to do my job to try and get the store open when it's supposed to. They didn't even listen to my manager, who was vouching for me, telling them that I, was a great employee, and they came in and told me they were letting me go.
We had gotten into kind of an argument, and it escalated into that individual yelling at me and my barista.
I'm sorry. It's weird. It's like their video. I don't know why this video is doing this all of a sudden. It's like their video doesn't go with the person that's actually talking.
Very loud.
Let me go to the next video. I don't know why it's not. I wonder if they realized that this video is doing this. It wasn't doing this before. Just very strange. See, watch. Let me refresh. Sometimes it's Twitter. Sorry about that, guys. No, I think it's definitely their video. Like, why is this video not playing? Let me try it again. I don't have autoplay on. Yo, they're really not trying to let people hear this video. They're really not trying to let people hear it. Hold on, let me see if they have it on the website. No, they don't. Okay, maybe it works now. Let's see. No, it's this video. It's only this video. I haven't had this problem with any other video. What's that? Throttled? Yeah. It could be on YouTube. I think I checked YouTube. I'll double check again.
Yelling at me and my barista.
Very strange.
No customers or anything.
Okay, we're just gonna, sorry about that, guys. We're just gonna check YouTube. I don't know why that video was fine earlier. More perfect union. That's the thing, like sometimes like these Twitter clips or whatever, for whatever reason, they just don't, they have difficulty playing on here sometimes, and I don't know why. Let me just double check. I'm just checking their YouTube page to see if they put it here too. They don't always put everything here. There we go. Okay, yeah. Well, okay. We'll watch it on YouTube. Sorry about that, guys. It looks like it's working better over there. That Twitter really like throttled that video. No kid. No kid. Okay, let's try this again.
Definitely think it was targeted retaliation for the whole unionization effort. I had been pretty vocal about my support for the union.
I was the main organizer for my store. I kind of knew, you know, it was something that could happen because I'm putting a target on my back, but I would do it over and over again if I could.
I gave 5.5 years of my life to this company. And for what? To be just tossed aside like this for trying to be proactive? I went into the store a few minutes early by myself, and according to policy, you're not allowed in the store alone. We had 3 of our morning workers call out. So I had to go in early because I had to figure out my plan. I was just trying to do my job to try and get the store open when it's supposed to. They didn't even listen to my manager, who was vouching for me, telling them that I, was a great employee, and they came in and told me they were letting me go.
So here's an example where the manager actually did vouch for the employee and they still didn't even listen to the manager. So it really wasn't even about that. Again, like I said, they try to find any little reason to let you go. Thanks for the super chat, Steve. Sabby, I manage a crew. They love me and I love them. Some making 6 figures or close, commission plus and hourly. That is awesome, Steve. There should be more managers like you. There really should. But yeah, his manager tried to help him and they didn't want to listen. Listen, if it wasn't for him coming in early, which that's ridiculous to be fired coming in early, they would have found another reason to get rid of him.
We had gotten into kind of an argument and it escalated into that individual yelling at me and my barista very loudly to the point where a full cafe was silent. He was leaving to go outside. And right as he was about to leave, I'm like, hey, again, just a heads up, I have to leave at 7 today. I can't stay over. And he still walked out. And, 7 o'clock rolled around. I waited a couple minutes and I had made sure this barista was set up and made sure he didn't need anything. There wasn't a line, no customers or anything. When I had tried to bring up, well, the shift supervisor I was working with, it was his shift. He decided to leave. Why is this happening to me and not him? I was told this is about you, not him, and to watch my tone.
In the termination notice, they accused me of violent and threatening behavior, stating that on or around March 11th, I was witnessed saying that I was going to punch our district manager, Sarah Jenkins, in the face, which is ludicrous because I had not seen her in the store myself in months. It was kind of just out of the blue. I had a clean record. I'd never been written up. So I was a good worker, like I knew my stuff.
Yeah, I don't think they really expected the unionization efforts in Starbucks to spread the way that it did. They did organize over 100 stores. Starbucks has responded by firing over 20 union leaders in recent months. This is absolutely illegal. You're not supposed to do retaliation. And I don't know, like hopefully Howard Schultz is held accountable for this in court. Hopefully he is. I'm not, I'm crossing my fingers over this because honestly, like I've seen CEOs just get away with so much. And so hopefully he is held accountable, but this is absolutely ridiculous. These are young people. They just want a future. That's it. I used to work at Starbucks, so I know how things go. Like when I was in college, I had a part-time job at Starbucks for a little bit. I used to love working at Starbucks. It's hard for me to go there now. It's like, number one, I don't drink coffee anymore. I haven't had coffee in over 3 years. I drink tea. And number two, just the way that they've treated their employees, this whole unionized efforts, it's just been a complete disaster. And they've shown that they don't really care about the employees. And so Howard Schultz is the perfect example of someone who pretends to be what they need to be when they're attempting to run for office. But when they're not running for office, you see them for what they really are. And this is who he really is. He is a capitalist that just wants to make money. How do you stop your employees from starting a union? What is wrong with them having a union? So he claims that he really wanted to protect the workers. He didn't really want to protect the workers. It was never really about that. He's a joke. Not to mention he stole someone else's recipe. Or I guess I can't say stole. But for those of you who don't know, I need to tell you about that, because the original Starbucks recipe did not come from Starbucks. It came from George. Let me see. Hold on. Let me pull this up. Make sure I get his name right, because I want to show you this, because this came out of Massachusetts. That's how I know about it. George Hallwell. George Hallwell. That's his name. That's where the recipe came from. You can tell everybody I told you about this. I'm going to share it with you so you'll learn a little bit of history. There was a man named George Hallwell. He created that coffee, but his coffee was not as fancy as Starbucks coffee. So for example, he didn't have like these fancy like frappuccinos and all that jazz. It was coffee in one of its most purest forms. And it was based right here in Massachusetts. One day, a couple of guys from Seattle heard about his coffee, flew all the way out to Massachusetts, and asked him if they could buy the recipe. So he cashed out, gave them the recipe, and decided to retire. But a couple years ago, he decided to come back because you know what? Turns out George didn't like what Starbucks did with his recipe. That's George Hallwell. So if you're ever in Massachusetts, he does have shops here that you can see. See, it says seeking out the finest coffees on earth. He's trying to bring it back to what it originally was before Starbucks came in. And he's traveled across the world to find the best beans. We can go to about George Hallwell. George's life in coffee began in 1975 with his first cafe, The Coffee Connection, in Cambridge's Harvard Square. So if you know anyone who was around Cambridge during that time, ask them about The Coffee Connection. Ask them. That's right. Yes, Desert Mantis, Starbucks burned his beans. Yes. He said they ruined the taste of his coffee. And people used to tell me that sometimes. They said like Starbucks coffee tastes like burned, like it was burnt or something like that. Like I could see that. I could see that. So there you go. The Coffee Connection. And then I think they have this little thing here. I wanted to make it a little bit bigger. We actually had a presentation about this at my former employer. We were talking about George Hallwell. So he says, give birth to specialty coffee in Boston. So you see here we go right here. Let me make this bigger. Doop, doop. By 1994, however, George came to feel that the time-consuming demands of financing operations and marketing in an acceleratingly competitive environment were divorcing him from what really gave him pleasure. His family, by then 6 children and 3 grandchildren, and the pursuit of great coffee. That year, George sold the Coffee Connection to Starbucks Coffee. That was 1994. So there you go. You learn a little bit every day. He has a new store here in Newton, Massachusetts, I believe. Like I said, he came out of retirement because he didn't like what they did to his coffee. All right. Gonna go to some of the comments here. Thanks for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Steve, are you hiring? Are you, Steve? I think Roger might want to go work for you. Shout out to Sean, says, I subscribe to your Substack. Thanks so much, Sean. Yes, guys, please make sure you do that. That's actually how you get notifications for us. We don't rely on notifications from YouTube. Half the time, I don't even get them, to be honest. So what we do is we actually put all of our videos, our live streams, and our clips on Substack. And then you'll get that email notification, and that lets you know that we're going live. So yeah, that's right. She's Black. The more you know, the more you know. There you go. There you go. All right, let's get into this next story here with Joe Rogan and Russell Brand. Now, I wanted to have this conversation because, let me go ahead and cue up this clip. I wanted to have this conversation because obviously, you know, Joe Rogan's interviews are like 3 hours long. I'm not going to put you through all that. I'm not going to put you through all of that. But there's one discussion during this conversation that I did want to focus on, and that's the one about these political labels and what these labels really mean and how it can cause you to become distracted from the real issue. Now, I thought this was really interesting. And then I have an article, an opinion piece that I want to discuss as well, where they talk about the same thing, about these political labels. So I think this is something that we discuss a lot, where you'll hear people say people are far right or they're far left and yada, yada. But what does that really mean when you look at the greater context? So let's go ahead and get into this discussion here.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
When we talk about what are the ideologies that drive us, the ideology of progress, this is why I have sometimes am skeptical, not about technology, the mastery and the geniuses that work in that field, but how technology and science as a subset of our economic ideology can create exactly the conditions that you're describing and that journalist has exposed. That if your ideology permits that, then what kind of ideology is that? What kind of unconsciousness are we living in? It's not an awakened culture. And all of the discourse around, like, you know, how we treat one another as individuals and progressivism culturally in domestic territories, hey, people should be allowed to do this and that, it's a nonsense. Right. If that is permitted, not only permitted, required. It's a requirement. You cannot have that economic model without that price being paid. And as a culture, whether it's me as an individual or our entire culture, we've accepted that contract. We've accepted those terms.
Are we an awakened culture? Are we an awakened society? I'd like to think that there are some people out there that are. But as a society, I don't feel like we're there yet. And I'll give you a couple examples. As much as we talk about the need to end the wars, as much as we talk about not having any type of nuclear escalation, the majority of Americans, and I'm only speaking for Americans here, the majority of Americans aren't even aware that that is even a threat. The majority of Americans are not even paying attention to this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Majority of Americans are not paying attention to foreign policy. And then you have to ask, why is that? A lot of people are distracted by the things that mainstream media wants you to be distracted by. We're distracted by ads on social media. We're distracted by social media itself. We're distracted by Netflix and chill, where you can actually spend an entire night just binge watching shows instead of trying to research what's going on in the world. And I know this because when I ask people about foreign policy, when I bring up these issues, the same things that we talk about on this show, I talk to people about those issues when I'm not in this space. Even those that are close to me. And that's how I know they're not aware. They're not paying attention to what's really going on. Yes, they'll complain that the prices are high. They'll complain about the cost of gas, the cost of eggs. They'll complain about all those things. They'll complain about the fact that they may have just been laid off. But when it comes to the bigger picture, the majority of Americans have not woken up. The majority of Americans are not paying attention to the fact that we are all pretty much controlled, or most of us are controlled by the billionaires and the oligarchs and that top 1%. Even though this was mentioned multiple times during Bernie Sanders campaigns, the majority of Americans, after those campaigns ended, they went right back to brunch. So they don't realize what's going on. And so you'll see people where they will spend a lot of time. They'll spend hours waiting in line to go to a concert. They'll spend hours waiting in line to get an iPhone. But they won't spend a couple of minutes to learn about what's going on in the world. What's happening outside of the United States. Most Americans don't care. Most of them are asleep. So that's something to think about when he mentions awakened society.
Well, we have in some areas of our life for sure. You know, hopefully people haven't done that in their interpersonal, intimate relationships, but we certainly have in the way we communicate with others. We've certainly accepted like very bizarre ways of communicating online. And sometimes that bleeds out into real life, like where someone talks to people in the real world as if they're on Twitter and they get bashed.
Yeah.
Like you see that sometimes. I think it's a very strange time where I don't think people have a lot of faith right now in institutions, and I don't think they have a lot of faith in authority. I don't think they really believe that there is someone who is wiser than them, that has a grand plan, that's logical, that's workable, where they're looking out for all of us. So I think there's like a feeling of chaos that exists today that I don't think has ever existed in my life like this before. Even back during like the Bush administration, when everybody thought Bush was a moron, they still thought there's a good cabinet and they're following all the checks and balances, even though they're probably extracting too much money, and there's probably a lot of cronyism and a lot of undercover deals and a lot of like no bid contracts with Halliburton and that kind of nonsense. He still thought they have things pretty under control. It's a very solid institution. Nobody believes that now.
That was also before the rise of social media. That was before Twitter became popular. That was before Facebook was really, at its peak. Like that was before all of that. And so I think what has happened is that people are paying attention to the wrong things. It was easier to stay focused and to pay attention to what was going on around you and what was going on in the world when you were actually a part of it. But if you're not actually a part of it, but you think you're a part of it because you're on your phones, you're not actually a part of it. You're not out there in person meeting with people and talking with people. And I read something recently the other day that said, my generation, the millennial generation and Gen Z generation, are the most lonely generations in America because we're connected with a lot of people virtually, but not in person. And I could see that. Sure, the pandemic didn't help. Let's just be real. If you lived in a state that was shut down like mine, the pandemic did not help that. And it was hard to get people out of that remote bubble and get them back into society. But I think that's the piece that's missing there when he mentions George W. Bush. That was before social media. That was before Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. Like, I've seen people more concerned about what the new dance is on TikTok than the possibility of a nuclear war. So we weren't as distracted back then.
You see Pete Buttigieg and fucking Kamala Harris and Biden can't get a sentence out. You're like, this is madness. These people are utter fools. And these are the people that are running everything. And these are the people that are getting us on the brink of war with Russia. And I don't have any faith in them. And I think most people don't.
I think you're right. And with the that era of the Cheney, Bush, Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld,
I just want to say one piece here. I know when he's talking about people not having faith in them, the problem is even the people that don't have faith in them, they'll still vote for them. And this is why I say you have to disrupt this two-party system, because a lot of people didn't have faith in Joe Biden, but they still voted for him. This is a cycle, and I've seen it happen all of my adult life. So it's one thing to not have faith in a politician, but does that really matter if you're still going to support them regardless because you're a part of their political party? And this is why I say the political parties are a big problem. Because if you have this mindset that you're going to support the party regardless, even if you don't necessarily like the candidate, and I know a lot of people did not really care for Joe Biden, but they were Democrats and they said, we got to support the party or we can't get Trump. No change is going to come if we continue to play that game. So that's the thing. It's great that more people are getting frustrated. It's great that more people are not happy with the way that the system is running, but you have to have action to that. You can't just be upset. You can't just say, I don't have trust in these politicians. What are you going to do about it is the question that comes after that. Because if you continue to play the same hand, and we're playing a game of poker and you continue to play in the same hand and you continue to lose, at some point you need a different hand. Let's go on.
It felt like, oh, these are the Death Star bots. This is what's happening is there's this risen up military industrial complex, Rand Foundation ideologues from the Republican right, who were the sanctioned baddies back in those days, are trying to profit from the colonization of the Middle East. It's part of a new American project. We sort of understood it. But from where I'm coming from, it was somehow recognizable. And 1 million people went on a march to prevent that war taking place because they knew there were no weapons of mass destruction, which we now know to be the truth. And as you say, now the figures that are in that place are sort of posing as the good guys, like affable and avuncular presidents and sort of friendly people of, like, that across the identitarian spectrum that's meant to feel inclusive and progressive.
They're wrapping themselves up with progressive identity politics and then promoting a war.
Yes,
at the same time. It's very
that piece right there. And we do see people doing that. They'll say, yes, we got the first Black vice president. We got the first this, the first that. But then they'll have no problem with our government bombing people abroad, bombing brown people abroad. It doesn't make sense to me. So we do have that happening. We do have some of the same people who are cheering on identity have no problem with people being murdered abroad by our government. They have no problem. So where are people's priorities? Like this is the question that I have. Where are your priorities? Where's the big win? Because if you're only focusing on the fact that we got Kamala Harris as vice president, she's the first Black, Asian woman as vice president. Okay. Where's the win though? What has she done? There's a difference between winning and just having representation. If you have representation, but the representation is not winning, what's it all for? It's just optics. And the problem that you have in this two-party system, especially in this country, is that more people are focused on that instead of being focusing on the fact that we have a possibility of a nuclear war. Instead of focusing on the fact that people are starving in Afghanistan because of the sanctions that have been implemented by the US government. Most Americans I talk to don't even know that, by the way. Instead of focusing on what's happening to people in Syria, what's happening to people in Yemen. Most people don't even know. And mainstream media keeps us distracted by it. And so does the two-party system. And both parties do it. It's not just the Democratic Party. Both parties play this game. Let's go on.
It's very wild.
Yeah, it feels like a mask and a veil. Like, this is what's interesting for me is as we navigate this new and emergent space of being able to present counter narratives and continually, like all of us now have like experience, oh, you're a right wing conspiracy theorist, you've joined the alt-right, you're a gateway to this, the dark web, all of that language that grows up around it. Like, this, and I've heard you speak about this obviously a lot, but the truth is that who isn't sympathetic? Anyone that's got a family or loves someone is sympathetic to the idea that people are going to have various types of identity around culture and religious expression and racial expression. And this is a conversation that the whole culture has to be involved in together. What my issue is, I don't think they believe in that stuff. I don't think they care. I don't think that they are creating an agenda to advance the interests of vulnerable people. I think they are using it as a distraction and a veil in order to carry on with the same kind of corporate and financial interests that have always determined what the establishment is. And if there's one thing we can point to in our lifetime, it's that the liberal establishment has become co-opted by the same forces that traditionally we regarded the right to have been co-opted by: military industrial complex, financial industry. And
bingo. So when you look at it that way, do the labels even matter? Do the political, like the far right, right wing, far left, liberal, when you look at it that way, do the labels really make that much of a difference when you have both parties that are pro-war, you have both parties that are corporate, and honestly, you have both parties that are right wing? The Democratic Party is not left. Mainstream media will tell you they are, but they're not. And you can tell that just by the policies. But it gives the optics because it makes people think, especially those who are Democrats, it makes them believe that they are when they're not. So if both parties are doing those things, do the political labels really matter? And that's the question that I really want you to think about. And people have different labels for themselves. Some people say they're Marxists, some say they're communists, some say they're, left wing or they're right wing or they're far left or far right or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you're a part of the two-party system, does your label really matter if both parties, for the most part, are doing the same thing? This is something I think that we should think about.
And there's palpable evidence for that. And in order to not acknowledge that transition's taken place, they're able to keep the cultural conversation going. We care about your right to express yourself and your identity. That's a way of not acknowledging we're just the same. We're pro-war. And now when there's that war, like Jimmy Dore and all those guys did that anti-war march in Washington or whatever, it's like 5,000 people go. Now, I don't know if that's because of the last few years and what the pandemic's done to people accumulating and gathering crowds, or whether people have lost the belief and faith that people can have any impact on politics anymore. There's just now this immersive sense of apathy, this, as you say, loss of trust in institutions and authority. But something extraordinary has happened when people that say that we're the peace and love party are the party that are advocating for war, won't include some of the complex conditions that have led to this current crisis, which there's clearly a case for, NATO's infringement on Russian territory, the 2014 coup. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's extraordinary that those conversations don't happen.
Right.
It's actually
let's comment on that for just a second. This is something else to think about too. So he mentioned the rally, which I went to, which I streamed, the Rage Against the War Machine rally. That's the rally he's referring to. And how, it was smeared by people saying, how dare you guys unite with those people? And they want an anti-war rally with just people that are supposedly on the left. Make it make sense, right? But even when you look at something like that, because that's what he mentioned there, it's like, if we're talking about these labels, the majority of American voters are independent. The majority of American voters are registered independent. But you don't hear much focus on that at all. It's like people are automatically labeled as left wing or right wing. I don't hear anybody yelling in the void, those damn independents. But the majority of American voters are. They don't mention it because they don't want you to hear about it, because they don't want you to realize, oh, wait a minute, most voters actually don't identify as one or the other. That would create too much buzz, by the way. That would create too much buzz. And so there's all this focus on the two parties, which is really just one corporate party. And if you're focused on that, then you're not focused on the fact that we're all being controlled by the people at the top. If you're focused on the political divide, you're not focusing on the class issue. Both parties will bring up class. You hear Republicans now saying that, yeah, we're the ones out there for the working class. Democrats say this, we're for the working class. We got to protect the working class. But neither of them do it in the end. And that is because they are owned by corporate powers that be. We talked about this on my show last night and a couple weeks ago, actually. The biggest company that most people have never heard of is BlackRock. And they own almost everything in the world. Almost everything. That includes news stations. Imagine that. But you never hear the people don't talk about them. You never hear it. Bernie Sanders can get up on stage and he can call out Amazon. He can call out Jeff Bezos. But we know that. We all know what Amazon is. Everyone knows what Walmart is. We know those people. We know who Elon Musk is. But you never hear them call out Larry Fink, who owns BlackRock. And BlackRock owns way more than Amazon does, than Jeff Bezos does. So if it's really about the people at the top, why wouldn't someone like Bernie Sanders call out BlackRock? Why wouldn't he call out Vanguard? Those are really the people that you really need to keep your eye on. When I say they own everything, I don't mean just they own a company here and there. I mean they own television stations, they own media, they own real estate. When the 2008 housing crisis happened, guess who bought up those homes that were foreclosed? Companies like BlackRock. And you saw who got bailed out. That was Wall Street, not the people who lost their homes. So the point that I'm trying to make is this: at the end of the day, the political labels, in my opinion, are a distraction. Let's stop referring to it as left wing and right wing and start referring to it as working class and the elites. Maybe that'll get people's attention. We'll finish up here, and I want to show you that article that discusses labels as well. There's a paragraph in there I want to show you.
Like that post-Trump and post-pandemic, everything sort of enters into that template. There are certain things you're not allowed to say now. If you sort of say, were Russia in any way provoked? Is there any legitimacy to this, to their military actions from their perspective? That's the same as saying, oh, I don't think you should take certain medications, or maybe masks aren't necessary. And people aren't, it doesn't seem that the culture is learning. It doesn't seem that as the evidence is evolving, that people are saying, oh, wow, look, the stuff you were being told 2 years ago now, the things you couldn't say online 2 or 3 years ago, now there's evidence for that. In fact, I've bought documentation in case the conversation went in this direction, Joe. In my new position as a legitimate investigative journalist, I've got actual papers that I can show you, from conspiracy to fact.
Okay. And you can see that entire interview on Joe Rogan's podcast. The interview is like 3 hours long. So we can't cover the whole thing. We can't cover the whole thing. But that was one topic I did want to discuss from that interview. But I want to show you this article here, The Burden of Political Labels, because I want you to see what happens when you have it. I'll make this a little bit larger because this is small. The burden of political labels. Labels provide order to a chaotic world. They're used to categorize everything from music, books, and movies, hurricanes, and hotels. While it is generally agreed that labeling is a necessary part of life, it is also recognized it affects our perception, judgment, and behavior. Applying labels to people in their politics affects personal interactions, often inhibiting conversations. And then I want to go to this piece here. Here we go. Despite these shortfalls, political labels are ingrained in part of society. Politics relies on association. Stripped of all the rhetoric, politics is about organizing. People assume political labels to associate with others, presumably working towards a shared goal. But it's rarely that straightforward. Like a good book or movie, people defy easy categorization. Individuals are incredibly diverse and often hold a wide range of political views depending on the subject or circumstance. It's why political labels need so many caveats and hyphens. Alt-right, far left or right, progressive liberal, moderate Republican, etc. It's also why political labels are rife for exploitation. And then this piece down here. Go to the end. It's a long article, so give me a minute. Making sure I'm at the right part. Here we go. The space between the labels is where the real work occurs. This is the area where ideas flourish, encumbered by the limitation of labels, an area where people assess ideas based on their merit, not their political affiliation. That's the key. Expanding the area between the labels will help reverse the negative impact that those labels had on the political climate. And instead of labels limiting people, people will limit labels. You have to focus on the ideas where you agree and you can work together with people. That's what you have to do. So if there is an anti-war rally, instead of focusing on the political ideologies of the people who are going to be there, maybe you should just come together for the common good, which is that all of you are anti-war. And pay close attention because we are getting closer to 2024. And the closer we get to 2024, you're going to see more people try to use this division. It's why people disrupt direct action. It's why people disrupt any type of community organizing or smear those types of things, because again, they know that those things actually work and politics does not. So they want you to focus on the things that actually don't work, not the things that do work, because they really don't want you to win. Thank you for the super chat, Steve. My top tech did 140K. The sales kid did 104K. I did 60. They made, I think you mean more than me. It's okay. You only need a high school diploma, good company. I'm going to retire. Everybody call Steve. Thanks for the super chat, Roger. Steve, what state are you in, bruh? Roger's going to hit you up. And thank you for the super chat, Justin. 25% of people are Dems. 25% of people are Republicans. So more or less 50% are independents. If the 50% got on board with the Libertarian or the Green Party, pick one, we'd overthrow the oligarchy. Thank you so much for that, Justin. I don't even think people even need to pick a party. Just leave the two-party system altogether. Just leave it. Hit the like button, guys. Thank you for the super chat. Historic Teachings, Denazify Ukraine and Congress. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. The author read my mind. Come together, CBI subjects. Yes, that is a good article. So that's the problem with the political labels. And the definitions of these labels change too, by the way. Over time, they change. So that's that. I do have to get going, guys. If you want to see me again, I'll be live at actually in an hour on my channel, The railroad workers will be back. They're going to join me again tonight, and I'm going to talk to them about the situation of the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. I want to get their take on that because last time they were on, they did explain to me that the safety issues were one of their concerns when they were trying to decide if they wanted to go on strike. So it'll be great to have them back, and I have news stories as well. But other than that, guys, have a good night and keep up the fight.